Good afternoon from Vienna, Virginia, and welcome to today's Leading Edge series, E&C Professionals Leading the Way on ESG, sponsored by Vault Platform. My name is Dan Waltman, and I'm the Vice President of Member Engagement at ECI. Today, our guest will be speaking about the importance of ESG in the workplace and how technology and data can provide real-time insight into workplace misconduct. Please note the content and opinions expressed there are solely those of the speakers and presenters. So let's get started. We want today's presentation to be highly interactive, so be sure to pop your questions into the chat. Today's speakers are Tori Reichman, Chief Customer Officer at Vault Platform, and Schor Babin, founder and principal of Schor Ethics Consulting. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lisa. I spent 17 years at Dun & Bradstreet, a public company in the business data space. Most recently in the role of Global Compliance and Ethics Leader, reporting to the Chief Compliance Officer. During my time at D&B, I built and branded the E&C program framework with code of conduct and other policies, training, communications, and a modern whistleblower program. I have lots of experience leading workplace investigations and partnering with leaders to promote and reward ethical leadership, transparency, and risk intelligence. I'm a passionate advocate for fostering a speak up, listen up culture, and I founded Schor Ethics Consulting in early 2021 with the primary goal of helping organizations build strong, ethical workplace cultures through the building blocks of an effective ethics and compliance program with a focus on modern speak up solutions and impactful messaging. I've assisted companies with workplace respect training, assessments of employee engagement and speak up culture, workplace investigations, and ESG reporting. Tori?
Hey, everyone. Hey, Lisa, thank you. Welcome. Hey, everyone, thank you for joining. Good afternoon, good evening for those that are based in Europe. I'm Tori Reichman, Chief Customer Officer at Vault Platform. And I am responsible for ensuring that we delight our customers from the outset of their relationship with Vault, specifically by delivering exceptional value and return on their investment. For those of you who may not know Vault already, I'll just give you a quick introduction. So we have a really clear mission, and that is to change the world of work by giving companies and their employees a safe space to speak up and resolve misconduct in the most human, confidential, efficient, and legally sound way possible. We are absolutely passionate about workplace culture, and we believe that every organization that adopts Vault can be a safer, healthier, more equal and diverse place of work as a result. Our technology-led solution completely transforms the way workplace misconduct is reported and resolved. It empowers employees to speak up about their experiences to their organization, and it helps businesses identify any issues or gaps in their risk and ethics strategy through really accurate real-time data. So now that you know a little bit about Lisa and myself, we wanted to pose a question to the group. Since the topic of today is around ESG, we're interested to hear from you where ESG sits in your organization. So have a think. Lisa and I will be quiet for about 20 seconds while you start to type your answers into the chat. And then we'll go into a bit of our fireside discussion over here. So there are some really good responses coming in. Folks are starting to say a mix of legal, compliance, ethics and compliance, general counsel. Yeah, a mix from some folks. Looks like in some organizations, they're still working it out. Okay, cool. Oh, really interesting. So, we've had someone come in from HR related only. Okay, cool. So please continue to let us know where it sits in your organization. This is, part of our discussion today. Lisa and I are both going to talk about ESG in great detail, and it's really, really valuable insight, I think, not just for us, but for everyone who's here to get a sense of where it's sitting in the org. So while you're still contributing, I'm going to ask you, Lisa, I'm going to get us started. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Fab. So since I've said ESG about 5 times, how about you kick us off and talk to us about what does ESG mean? What does it mean when we talk about ESG?
Sure. And let me say first that I'd like to acknowledge the 19 children and the 2 adults who were killed by gunmen yesterday at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. It's another tragedy at a school, but remember, it's also a workplace. If anyone thinks that ESG is a political play or someone else's problem, think twice. Workplace violence is an ESG issue, and it is our issue. So with that, kind of going back to your question, ESG, environment, social, and governance, is about creating value over the long term in ways that benefit all stakeholders. So that's employees, customers, shareholders, investors, and the community. A company that has an ESG strategy that is grounded in its values and its mission and is tied to its business purpose builds public trust and builds a strong brand and reputation. It attracts talent, motivates employees, it helps identify and mitigate enterprise risks, and it is more resilient to change. It helps the company stay competitive. In other words, when the ESG effort becomes a profit center, that means the way it conducts operations and the way it builds its products is profitable. It's a customer and talent magnet, and it's an innovation engine. That's when its benefit truly compounds. And we know profitable means scalable. And scaling ESG goals and initiatives at the core of the business is how real game-changing impact is made. According to a recent BCG article, a true ESG strategy is not about what a company does with the money it makes. It's about how a company makes money. On the contrary, and this is just an example, and the example will remain anonymous, is a company with a stated mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, very lofty goal, but has recently settled with the EPA for years of Clean Air Act violations and neglecting to track its own emissions. ESG correlates with business success. Companies that develop a corporate culture and an ESG strategy with strategic goals, robust management tools and frameworks, a budget, controls, an incentive structure, and very importantly, metrics to drive ESG outcomes and measure progress against goals will very likely outperform their competitors. But ESG is not a new concept. Most publicly traded companies in countries like the US, UK, France, Germany, just as to name a few, have implemented ESG initiatives. And elements of ESG are already embedded in corporate compliance programs, in codes of conduct, in compliance training, in due diligence processes. But as we know, ESG is so much more than just compliance.
It's super interesting. I think you've talked about a lot of facets and a lot of really good context for us. The thing I'm kind of most interested to hear about at this moment is over your experience over the last 17 years, over the last 5 years, over the last 2 years, really, how has the business landscape changed as it relates to ESG?
Yeah, and I would say a huge change has been in the last couple of years in the ESG space. So there's growing interest from all stakeholders, customers and investors and regulators in what the company stands for and how it uses its voice for good, for change. With reputation being one of the biggest corporate assets, most important corporate assets, companies and their boards must have a perspective on ESG and a plan for demonstrating ESG's value, or they're going to risk giving the impression or developing a reputation that they don't care. And we know employees are paying attention. This new generation of employees considers more than ever the company and its leadership's position on ESG, when making decisions on and evaluating a company for its employment. For employment. Investors are paying more attention to ESG. There's been an uptick in ESG-related shareholder proposals, in investor activism, and there's more focus on ESG metrics and sustainable profitability. Regulators are definitely focused on ESG disclosure with the emergence of new frameworks, new indices, and there's a particular focus of late on gender and race disclosure, and also on greenhouse gas emission disclosure. And then finally, there's a growing concern with greenwashing. And one of the first risks, I read this somewhere, one of the first risk areas that new ESG officers or other leaders who are taking on ESG responsibilities are being cautioned to review is actually the people that are producing and writing the annual ESG report, to caution against greenwashing, because there's lots of issues with that. So amidst the rise of social movements of the last couple of years, last 2 to 3 years, social movements, environmental crises, ongoing pandemic worries, and ethical lapses in the news of the last couple of years, the workforce, the consumer base, and the investor and activist communities are determined more than ever to raise their voices and be heard. So companies have to be ready to listen and be prepared to respond to these voices by having a very robust speak up, listen up culture, one where the employees are bringing ESG related issues to the surface on topics, ESG related topics that include physical or environmental safety, discrimination, forced labor or child labor, or corruption in the supply chain, or illegal payments. And those are just to name a few. Employees are ready to speak up, and they'll go externally. That means they've spoken up inside, they're not getting what they are looking for, and they go outside of the company to find ways to be supported with their concerns.
Yeah, I completely get that. Everything that you're saying around, how talent is now focused on the ESG strategy that their prospective employers and the way that they're delivering on it, what investors are looking for, and the change that we're seeing by regulators. I think I personally, that completely resonates with me, and I'm guessing for the audience, if we could see faces, it's so strange not seeing faces in an audience anymore, but if we could see faces, I imagine we'd see like a bunch of heads nodding right now as well.
Right. So Tori, how does Vault tie into ESG from your perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Vault actually helps across a few dimensions. I think the first dimension is that we help surface ESG related issues from employees directly, right? And so the idea, the problem that one of the problems that exists in the employer-employee relationship today is that employees who are a company's kind of first line of defense or first line of they're kind of like the tentacles out there seeing everything that's taking place. Employees are the front line, and they are the ones that you need or that you want to empower to speak up because they know what's happening. And Vault helps get directly to those employees so that they feel safe and trusting in the organization, so they can inform the organization about any breaches that they witness or experience that will go against the company's ESG strategy or policies for that matter. Another way that we help is, and we talked about this a little bit before, we kind of touched on it, but it's about providing businesses, by providing investors, by providing regulators with hugely valuable access to real-time data, aggregated, anonymized data that helps inform the organization about the components that need the most attention. So it really allows you to get to the crux of where are these breaches taking place in your business, and start to inform what you can do to intervene and mitigate them. So I'll give you an example. If you think back to Volkswagen, this is an example of an environmental issue that employees knew about. Dieselgate was an extremely elaborate fraud by Volkswagen that included installation of software in diesel vehicles intended to fool government emissions testers, right? There was false certification to government authorities to say that the vehicles were compliant. There were deceptive marketing of the vehicles to consumers, which were positioned as clean diesel, as well as a cover-up and destruction of evidence. So there was a lot taking place in that organization where people knew about it. And if they had had the trust in the organization, if they had felt safe and secure, then potentially, ideally, they would have spoken up and this could have been avoided. Some other, stories that you've heard about in the news over the last year or so even include, well, a couple of years include the story of Theranos, Activision Blizzard, Wells Fargo, and unfortunately, there are loads more that I haven't even mentioned, but pop up with a really high frequency. I think the idea behind this is that what you really want is to be able to empower your employees so that they know how and where to speak up when they see something or when they learn about something that goes against the company's ESG or ethics strategy and policies. We also, through the technology, we help demonstrate that the people who do speak up are heard by providing them with the comfort and the confidence that actually what they're raising is being addressed by the organization. And then, like I said before, from a real-time data and analytics perspective, you're able to see at a high level, at a very detailed level, what's taking place in the ethical health of your organization. So hopefully that paints a picture.
Absolutely, thank you.
Good. I may turn the table back on you for a second and ask you, thinking about the players in this space, thinking about the role of ethics and compliance professionals, which we know many of our audience are. How has the role of ethics and compliance professionals changed in the last few years specifically? Yeah,
no, that's a great question. It kind of ties into the opening question you had earlier about where ESG sits in the organization, as we can see from the responses. There's certainly a variety of different ways that companies have positioned ESG, so it really does go to this question. So ethics and compliance professionals understand the business and they have experience with programs, building programs that are based on the federal sentencing guidelines to strengthen company culture, provide oversight, create policy frameworks, and work cross-functionally with other teams like finance, HR, legal, investor relations. It's really there's a lot of collaboration when you're sitting on the compliance team. They also have important operational roles on topics that span both ethics and compliance and ESG, like human trafficking and anti-bribery, data privacy, and third-party due diligence. They also have an eye to red flags. That kind of the ears to the ground, and an eye to these red flags, and are also very sensitive to cultural trends and cultural divides. They already have the ear of the board, right? And they already have an appetite for using their skills for good. So again, they're very well positioned to be a big part of this ESG picture. ENC professionals also have knowledge and understanding of global, domestic, and industry-specific regulatory guidelines and standards. Now, the lightning speed of change in the workplace also requires new skill sets and different ways of thinking of corporate leadership, and also of the ethics and compliance professionals in particular, to tackle an absolutely unprecedented number of emerging risks. So, the last 2 years have added to this list with things like remote or hybrid work, the Great Resignation, corporate leaders taking or having to take a political stand, such as Disney, for example. The ENC professionals are increasingly being called upon to take the lead, to collaborate on, or to be an advisor to the company's ESG programs, because there's a natural fit between the two pieces, the ENC and the ESG pieces. They bring a ethics and compliance mindset to ESG to help answer the question of how, not only what are the goals, but how to meet these ESG goals. Because they already are invested in driving company values, in gaining the support of the board, in securing executive oversight, and implementing a solid framework for implementing an effective program. E&C professionals are, now more than ever, protectors of the company reputation and value. They are strategic partners and advisors to the business. They're influencers, networkers, collaborators, and trusted advocates for employees, which is a very important piece that may be a little bit different than some of the other areas of the business. They're meant to build bridges, not walls, while at the same time, very importantly, standing up to pressure from senior management and speaking truth to power. All very important for the ESG world. The job description for ethics and compliance, whether for seasoned professionals or for those just getting started in this field, is not getting shorter. All of us in this field must be prepared for this ever-changing landscape that requires us to learn on our feet, to be curious, creative, tech-savvy, and data-driven. And these are not always things that were in our original wheelhouse, right? And to roll up our sleeves and be prepared to be chief cook and bottle washer. And alongside a positive attitude, we must also bring our unflappable values, integrity, and compassion, and our drive to make the world a better place and a more inclusive place. So most believe that the ethics compliance professionals should not own ESG, but they certainly should have a central role and a seat at the table. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing. Like nowadays, E&C professionals need to have an incredibly wide range of skills and such an extensive purview looking across the organization. I mean, the folks that I've met and hearing the way you've talked about it, I mean, they're incredibly influential in their businesses because, like you said, chief cook and bottle washer, right? Like you've got the strategy, you've got to look at what's happening in the organization today. You've got to look 2, 5, 7, 10 years ahead and understand the trends. There's science, but there's also a huge component of actually we need to be at the forefront and help shape the way ethics and people are behaving in a business and ensure that the business is set up for success in a changing environment. I also want to point out, although maybe I'm going to embarrass myself now if you say no, but did you use a West Wing reference in there, speaking truth to power?
No.
Okay, for any West Wing fans.
I'll be honest, I haven't seen West Wing.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Truth to power is a term very often used in the ethics and compliance space because not everyone can be a chief compliance officer or an ethics and compliance professional. You do have to be able to stand up to the power, and you are protecting the company. Like I said, it's a unique position for an ESG professional.
No, totally. I think the influencing skills that folks who go into the E&C profession have are some of the highest, most honed skills in their skill set, because exactly like you say, regardless of what your level is in the organization, your responsibility it will absolutely transcend the functions and the hierarchy in your company. And so having this kind of ability to speak up, to be able to identify areas of risk and concern, and be able to have that seat at the table to really inform the direction that things are going in I think it's such a valuable skill for folks to have.
Great. So let me ask you a question, Tori. How important is trust in the company employee and the company customer relationships?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite favorite topics to talk about is trust between companies and the people that kind of bring them to life, whether that's the employee or the customer, vendor, supplier, ecosystem. So hopefully this won't be a surprise to anyone, but I think it is incredibly important. I think it's essential that there's trust. So did you know that just over half of all office workers surveyed that we spoke to recently have personally experienced some form of workplace misconduct during their working lives? For me, it's shocking. And, when we spoke to them, what we actually heard from employees was that if you hadn't experienced it, you probably had witnessed it. And I just think it's astonishing. Mm-hmm. So, when you think about trust, ESG matters. What we hear from customers is that ESG matters are frequently coming up in misconduct reports about things that are happening within the company and with the company's partners or ecosystem, such as, like I said before, their vendors, their suppliers, their customers, et cetera. There are some examples. I mean, Lisa, you talked about it, so I won't go into the detail, but from an environmental perspective, you have environmental regulation violations, you have health and safety issues in manufacturing, and issues with consumption of water and energy, et cetera. From a social perspective, you have, code of conduct violations, you have child labor issues, you have DE&I issues, harassment and discrimination. And then from a governance perspective, you have issues with transparency within reporting, conflict of interest, political contributions, et cetera. And so the data shows that the generation in organizations today massively, massively value a speak up culture. And Lisa, you said it, these folks will genuinely factor the company's approach to speak up, to ESG. They will factor that into their decision making when they're deciding who to work for. And the reality is that when they don't feel heard, this current workforce cohort is much more likely to speak up externally and publicly. And that introduces a whole new level of risk to organizations. So really, the idea is that companies need to build trust with their employees so that they will feel safe in speaking up internally. Things that companies can do to build this trust include, a range of training, not just training the company on what the policies say, but actually investing in training your managers on how to create an open work environment and train them so that managers feel comfortable speaking to their teams, and so that the teams have trust that managers will hear their concerns and take them seriously. Companies can also really clearly define and communicate the processes and the tools that they want employees to use when they do speak up, and positively reinforce when employees do speak up. So recognize that this has taken a huge effort for them to come forward. In certain organizations, what I've actually seen companies do is at the quarterly town hall, they will talk in aggregate about trends that they are starting to see through their speak up program, the types of things that have been surfaced, as well as the mitigations that the business are putting in place. And when employees hear that, when they see the real actions that the business are taking, they feel safe and trusted to the next time they see something, they feel confident in speaking up because they believe the business will do something about it. Right. I think probably the last comment I'll make on the trust piece is tying it into technology, and that in using technology, there are, incredible new ways to encourage and enable your employees to come forward when they are ready to speak up. So some of the things that Vault has been able to do and the ways that we've been able to help our customers build trust within their employee ecosystem, within their external ecosystem, is that companies can now offer anonymity in a way that is completely unmatched by legacy solutions. So specifically, employees are now able to communicate directly with the person who's investigating their concern without disclosing their identity. And from the business's perspective, their investigations are no longer impeded. So they're getting the value, they're getting the concern raised to them, they're respecting the employee's need for anonymity, and yet they're still able to carry out a holistic, comprehensive investigation. And that goes a long way to reinforcing trust for those who are maybe sitting on an experience that they've had and otherwise not willing to speak up. I think the last thing is that there's something companies can offer that has literally never been seen before, which is the idea to enable employees to come forward knowing that they have safety in numbers. So the idea is that people can now come forward knowing that they are part of a pattern. And both of these, both the anonymity and also this ability to go together, to go with people who have a similar concern, goes incredibly far to mitigating a very natural fear of retaliation that many people have around coming forward. And that's another reason that people don't feel safe speaking up, is around this huge fear of retaliation.
Right.
I know I said that was the last thing, but I just thought of one other fact that I'll share, and this came from a very prominent whistleblowing lawyer, and what she shared quite publicly is that whistleblowers specifically, so where employees see a concern, a breach of a company's ESG strategy, whistleblowers will actually raise their concern to their organization between 5 and 6 times before they go external to a body like the SEC. And so the idea is that in organizations, people want to do what's right for the business. They want to alert them to the misconduct that's taking place, to these breaches in ESG. But what they're finding actually is that they are speaking up and the business isn't taking notice of it, isn't doing something about it. And that erodes employee trust. So by investing, by demonstrating to employees that you hear their concerns, that you investigate them, by giving them that clear visibility, you're actually going a huge way to reinforcing that really positive cycle of trust when people do speak up.
Right. And I do want to add to that. There was one question, and thank you everyone, because the questions are coming in fast and furious, and there are such sophisticated questions that I don't think we can answer them so quickly. One question that did come up sort of midway is about is the data that's being reported through systems like that Tori is talking about, is that the only data on ESG that you're talking about that can identify breaches and issues? And the answer is absolutely not. There are lots of ways that companies have, methods that they have to identify risks related to environment, social governance, and all the subcategories that fall under those 3 headings. The reported, what employees are seeing and hopefully reporting because they have this trust that Tori talked about is helps and supplements the other pieces of data and the other sources of data that companies have in aggregate. So whether it's through risk assessments, through employee surveys, through the hotline or other reporting mechanisms like Vault system and other technology, through the T&E system, through the financial systems. There's so many, through the procurement, the accounts payable systems. There's just so many points of data that a company has in aggregate. And then on top of that, you've got employees who are raising concerns. They're kind of highlighting it and putting a light because they're the ones experiencing or seeing it or hearing about it. Those are all the ways that companies then have to take that data, kind of feed it back into their assessment process, see where those risks are, take action, and head off the issue before they become bigger ones. And also, it feeds into their planning for their strategy. What programs are they going to build based on the risks that they know exist in their company, whether they're unique to that industry, that region, that particular company, or more generally. So, the piece that employees through systems like Vault provide is extraordinarily helpful to kind of put fine points on other data points. So hopefully that adds a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's great. I may direct us in a future looking way. So let's say you had a lovely magic 8-ball or a little glass ball where you could see the future. What do you think will be the ESG concerns that are going to dominate the headlines over the coming years?
Yeah.
And given that we're like now entering another very trying situation economically.
Yeah. So at least for the foreseeable future, I think that there's, and I think some of the questions allude to this point, many leaders still see an inherent trade-off between choosing a more sustainable future and achieving business growth and profit. They see spending on ESG-related, ESG-related initiatives as a capital expense, like to reduce energy use, to go towards renewable energy, paying living wages, and so on, as purely cost and not as investment. So I think what's going to dominate the conversation onward is balancing the needs of the business and its fiduciary duty to the shareholders to grow against the pressure from all of the stakeholders in aggregate to consider the broader goals of environment, the E, employee social well-being, and actually other business partner well-being, that's the S, and governance, the G. And also investor activism that's aimed at improving diversity and equality in corporate America, I think is going to be really top of mind. And we're seeing that. In general, institutional investors are being much more aggressive if they see that the boards do not understand how ESG and particularly diversity fits into the long-term strategy. And Exxon is just one example. The public company, the other kind of related topic I think that's really top of mind is public company board diversity. According to Larry Fink, and I'm going to quote him, boards with a diverse mix of genders, ethnicities, career experiences, and ways of thinking have, as a result, a much more diverse and aware mindset. They are less likely to succumb to groupthink or miss new threats to a company's business model. And they're better able to identify opportunities that promote long-term growth. So again, I really think that when we talk about tone at the top starts with the board and the diversity of board. When a board is diverse, that demonstrates to the entire organization the importance of diversity, and then the benefits of that just flow through the company. But I mean, that's a position that many will take. But I think that's going to be part of the dialogue going forward. There's also regulatory changes that support whistleblowers, such as the EU Whistleblower Directive. And I know Vault has done a lot to kind of bring a lot of attention to this topic. New regulatory standards for the mandatory ESG disclosures. I know there's a lot of discussion on this topic, but proposals for public companies to disclose greenhouse gas emissions from their operations and from the energy that they consume, and even to get independent certifications of these estimates is something that's coming up, and a push towards this is really fascinating, a push towards metrics that not only demonstrate progress year over year. So you start with you're just starting to build a program. You set your goals, you build some metrics, and then you measure against those metrics year over year to demonstrate progress. But there's a push towards metrics that indicate impact, not just numbers, but what's the impact of that initiative on the environment, on the on DEI, on fair wages, etc. So that I think is going to again get a lot of attention. I mean, I think the E will always dominate headlines as companies try to become more sustainable, reduce their contributions to a warming climate, either directly or through their supply chain. Corporate culture and workplace conduct is particularly in the new world of work, I think is always going to be top of mind. and a growing area of concern. DEI issues and with all of its complexities, mental health. I mean, there's just so much. Mental health, supply chain issues, particularly social issues like human trafficking. And really, there's just so much more. I mean, the list can go on. But in kind of a, back of the envelope exercise, I think these would be the topics I'd identify.
I mean, that's a lot. That goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is just the breadth and the depth of skills and things that are going to come across the desk of E&C professionals, right? It's just going to keep coming, and it's going to keep coming fast and furious, and it's going to evolve. But it almost feels like today that every facet of a business, there is risk associated with it. And as companies are expanding the way they think about ESG and truly putting together ESG strategies, it shows you how much of the business operations and interactions can and should be considered when thinking about a business's ESG strategy. So it's, there's a lot in there for people to sink their teeth into for the next few years.
Right. Great. Okay. So I know we do want to leave time at the end for addressing some of the questions or getting more questions. But let me just ask you, Tori, how will the data generated from technology help business move forward? And what key insights do you think it can provide?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. I think to move forward, I think having the right technology that truly allows you to capture data and connect the dots between events or between subjects of a concern can absolutely help prevent smaller issues from spiraling and becoming bigger ones. Predicting and preventing risk, essentially mitigating risk by predicting and preventing events, is something that technology can do because of the ability to identify patterns at the outset. So now you can say with confidence, two incidents signifies to me that it's not just one, it's not just isolated. Maybe there's a pattern here, and I'm much more quickly able to get into the crux of what's taking place in my organization and start to put actions in place to be able to mitigate these concerns. I think also, technology that can facilitate any reduction in time spent on an investigation, shorten that time to resolution of a case and enable collaboration among investigators and with the reporter, it can massively help the organization improve the investigation process, both from an operational perspective, but also from the sense that the reporter, that the employee, that the external party has of their experience. And it makes the overall experience so much more positive for everyone that's involved, including not just the reporter, but actually the subject of the investigation, because there's very clear information. You're able to kick off an investigation having all the information that you need to actually know where you're supposed to be spending your time. And I think that's incredibly valuable when you've got, lots of information coming into your organization. I'm going to give you two different data points. So we conducted some research, I kind of referenced it earlier, and we spoke to 2,000 office workers, and 86% of those that we spoke to said that businesses need to find secure ways to collect and leverage data about misconduct in their organization to support the long-term strategies, such as ESG strategies that are designed to combat this misconduct. That's, a huge number of folks that really believe that the businesses need to find secure ways and need to invest in the tools and the mechanisms to get their arms around this information. I think the last data point that I'll leave everyone with is that about 3/4 of employees that we spoke to said that they would be far more likely to use an app-based channel rather than, you know, a legacy channel like a telephone hotline to be able to report misconduct to their employer. And I think, you know, that's because we're in this period of transition where people realize that they don't feel safe using some of the legacy mechanisms that are out there, and they are practically begging for new ways to be able to speak up to their organization in a way that helps them feel safe and secure and protected. And it's funny because I think really in about 5 years, this won't even be a conversation because whereas now most people are using apps for most things, I think in 5 years, everybody's going to be using apps and technology for literally everything. So I just think technology is the way to move forward, and the ability to get your arms around real-time data and insights that can inform your ESG strategy. I just don't see any other way forward but then to do that.
Great. Yeah. No, I mean, I very much agree with that last point. I think when speaking, I think there's some research that, you know, when you call a hotline number and you're getting somebody on the phone and it's not even somebody from the company, it's a third party. It doesn't give the person reporting the opportunity to kind of really think about the questions. You know, they hesitate. How much are they going to? But when they have the opportunity in their own time, in their own space, to kind of carefully craft and think about how they want to respond, I think they feel safer. So obviously the key is employees, A, feeling safe, B, feeling that when they do report that their concerns are taken seriously, that there's action. Even if it doesn't resolve the way they wanted to, but at least they know that their concern was taken seriously. And 3, that they won't suffer from retaliation, which is a big concern. So there's a lot companies can do around all of that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay.
So yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say there are a lot of questions, and it's very difficult to read the questions and give them their due space. They're very, very interesting questions, and I think we will absolutely look at them and respond. But I think we need some time to kind of think about it and think about the answers, the questions and the answers. But there was the last question that I saw. I wouldn't mind taking a stab at. And the question is it possible to quantify the investment that's required in the ESG area, let's say as a percentage of the company revenue, to determine that the organization is really taking things seriously? So this is not necessarily a comprehensive answer. However, I think I'd like to tie the answer back to things we've said earlier. And that's ESG is not politics. Well, in my view, it's not about politics, right? This is about, you know, creating long-term value, right? For the company, for all of the shareholders, for the community, and for the investors, right? And so it's meant to achieve lots of things. But the company strategy has to be, it's not a numbers game, right? It's got to be tied to the company's mission and to its values, to what it cares about as a company, what it stands for, what it cares about, what its goals are. And so, and an ESG strategy that's just out there kind of in a vacuum means nothing. And eventually it's just numbers, right? It's just to check the box. It's got to be tied to what the business is trying to achieve and who it's trying to impact and what is the good it's trying to do in the world, and what it cares about and what its employees care about. So it's not just a number like, okay, it's got to be 1% or whatever the number is. It's got to tie to the company's mission and values. What do we care about? And these are the things we're going to, because you can't do everything. You can't boil the ocean. You can't solve all world problems in your first year of ESG strategy. You have to figure out what are its key objectives, what it cares about, what are those things, and those are the things you're going to focus on, right? And so that's more important than some sort of, you know, statistic, right? Secondly is companies have to determine, all right, there's sort of like this matrix of what do we care about, and then where are our risks, right? So you've got to do some sort of risk assessment. Enterprise call risk assessment. Where are our greatest risks? And you do that looking at the data. Through a risk assessment, through the reporting mechanism, what your employees are telling you, and lots of other ways, then you get a sense of, okay, where are our greatest risks and what do we care about, and what does the company and our employee base and our investors and the community care about, and where those two intersect. That's where you spend your time and your focus and your money and your dollars, right? And that's a much better exercise than some kind of check the box. So hopefully that answers that question. And obviously, if you have anything else, Tori.
No, I think it's a great answer, and especially the last point is, you can't do everything, and you can't do everything certainly all at once. So it's how do you prioritize? How do you know where to direct your investment efforts? And it is exactly by looking at the data, understanding your entire group of stakeholders, right? All encompassing,
Right.
And overlaying those two. And that using that will help inform the choices that you're going to make so that you can start to see the type of change in the organization that you're looking to see.
Right.
And then, right, it's not about a flat fee of you need to spend X percent, because it's ultimately what we're talking about really at its core is behavior change, and behavior change at an organizational level, at an individual level. And so that's it's a big thing.
Right. And so once you've gone through this exercise of figuring out kind of that interconnection between what you care about, you and all of your stakeholders care about, and where are your greatest risks, then you start, the company could start to put together a plan. With a plan, then you could identify, okay, what are the metrics that are going to help us? What are our goals, and what are the metrics that are going to help us measure how we're progressing from year over year? And then you layer on top of that, of course, the impact. So it's a staged approach. You can't boil the ocean, and you can look at some of the low-hanging fruit, but again, everything has to be tied back to company mission and values.
Totally.
Okay.
So is there another question that we want to take? I mean, like Lisa said, these are great questions, and they require, we want to be able to give them
Right.
really good comprehensive answers. Do you have another one that you want to tag off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's the same person. I think, or if this question was asked twice, but the question is, can ethics and compliance professionals work independently, or do they get hired by companies? If I'm understanding the question correctly, I think the answer is, most public companies will have a ethics and compliance department or group. They will have a chief compliance officer. They'll have a few compliance managers. It really depends on the size of the company. Sometimes it's centralized if it's a global company. Sometimes you've got, regional compliance officers. But oftentimes companies, again, it depends on the size, it depends on the way the company is structured, but oftentimes they will bring in outside resources for areas that the company doesn't have expertise in, or the compliance officers don't have expertise in. And as we talked about, so much of this is evolving and so much of this is new. They may not have the ESG expertise, for example, and they'll bring in, outside resources to supplement what they have internally. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but maybe it's somebody who is not at a public company, but that's typically a public company. Many smaller companies or private companies, many of them may not have that infrastructure. They'll use outside resources. Sometimes the lawyers will double up, but my position on that is ethics and compliance are very much separate from legal and the legal department. So I think both are needed.
Thanks, Lisa. There's one other question I might be able to give a quick answer to, which is, where can employees find ESG information about the firms that they're thinking about working for? So in my experience, public companies, you'll be able to find, in most public companies today, you'll certainly be able to find something in their annual report. So their most recently published annual report, it's become quite common. And I should know, but can't say for sure if it's a regulatory requirement to publish about your ESG strategy in the annual report, but absolutely companies are putting it in there and are filling a lot of really detailed information. I think the level of detail and the maturity of a company's program will be determined based on their starting point. And so, but that's always, the annual report is always a really good place to look. I would also say, right, first and foremost, the company's website, and then publicly available forums. So the company will say, they will publish information in their annual report, they'll have their website, but actually a great place to find out about internal folks' experiences, employees' experiences, is through publicly available information, such as what the company is saying on LinkedIn, what employees are saying on LinkedIn, other channels. I'm not going to list all the social media channels that are out there, but social media is a very good way. And any other forums that you would go, when you are in your own employment seeking process, to be able to learn about how companies are, how they're living out their ESG strategy and vision.
Right. And I would just add that many of the public companies do have separate ESG reports. It's, a relatively new thing. And if it's available, absolutely, very, very important resource. I would just caution to say that some of them are more marketing a tool than anything else, and I think you can pretty much tell the difference. So you want to make sure that if what you're reading is very metrics driven, is very much tied to the company values and mission, and then you'll get a little more information that you're looking for. Okay, I think we're going to turn this back over.
Yeah, Dan.
Well, thank you, Lisa and Tori. That was a great presentation, and thank you for your insights on such a timely and rapidly evolving topic. I also wanted to thank Vault Platform for sponsoring today's event. So in the few minutes that we have left, I just wanted to touch upon a couple of housekeeping items. One, ECI is not keeping